The Empire had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. Their ships filled the darkness between worlds like silver dust scattered across black cloth. Their soldiers had conquered 900 planets. Their name was spoken with fear on every world that knew of them. Emperor sat upon the crystalline throne in the heart of the capital world. He was not the first emperor. He was not even his first body. The had learned long ago how to move a mind from one body to another, had lived in 17 different bodies across 3,000 years. He had watched empires rise and fall. He had crushed rebellions and burned worlds that refused to kneel. He had never known defeat. On this day, his cartographers brought him something interesting. They carried ancient star maps into the throne room. These maps were old, very old. They came from civilizations that they had destroyed so completely that even their names were forgotten. The cartographers spread the maps before the emperor. They pointed to the same strange marking that appeared on every single chart. In one corner of known space, there was a region marked only with a single word in a dozen dead languages. The boundary. Beyond this marking, the maps showed nothing. No stars, no planets, no data at all, just empty space and warnings. The warnings were written in shaking handwriting. Some were carved into metal. Others were burned into stone, but they all said the same thing. Do not cross, do not seek, do not call out into that dark. Studied these warnings with cold eyes. His face showed no emotion. His tall body remained still upon the throne. Around him, his advisors waited in silence. They knew better than to speak before the emperor was ready. What do the old ones say? Finally asked. His voice was deep and smooth like polished stone. One of his advisors stepped forward. This was Merchant Lord who handled relations with the conquered species. He was nervous. The emperor could smell his fear. The elders weep when we ask them about the boundary, said. They say their ancestors crossed it once, many thousands of years ago. Only one ship returned. The crew had torn out their own eyes. They said they had seen something that should not exist. And the Ani, the emperor asked. They refused to speak of it at all, my lord. Their crystal bodies turn dark when we mention the boundary. We believe they are experiencing fear. We have never seen them afraid before. Leaned back on his throne. The Ani were ancient beings made of living crystal. They had existed for millions of years before the rose to power. They had seen the birth and death of countless civilizations, and they were afraid of whatever lay beyond the boundary. A lesser emperor might have felt caution. A wiser ruler might have respected the warnings of older and more experienced species, but had conquered fear itself. He had burned gods and shattered worlds. He had crushed every enemy that stood before him. What could possibly exist beyond the boundary that his mighty fleets could not defeat? I want to know what is out there, the emperor said. Prepare an expedition. His advisors exchanged worried glances, but none of them dared to argue. The emperor's word was law. His commands were absolute. Within 3 months, the third expeditionary fleet was ready. 2,000 warships gathered at the edge of known space. 3 million soldiers and crew members prepared for the journey. It was one of the largest exploration forces the Empire had ever assembled. Admiral was chosen to lead the expedition. She was one of the finest military minds in the Empire. Her scales were the color of dark bronze, and her eyes burned with cold intelligence. She had won 47 battles without a single defeat. She had crushed rebellions and conquered new worlds for the glory of the. She stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Eternal Silence, and looked out at the stars. Behind her stretched the lights of the Empire. Ahead lay only darkness and mystery. Her second-in-command, Captain Hex, approached her. He was young but capable. His loyalty to the Admiral was absolute. The fleet is ready, he reported. All ships have confirmed their jump coordinates. We can depart on your command. Nodded slowly. She had studied the ancient maps. She had read the warnings. She had interviewed the elders herself and watched them weep with terror at the mere mention of the boundary. Part of her understood their fear. The unknown was always dangerous, but she was an admiral. She had conquered the unknown many times before. She would do so again. "There is something out there," she said quietly. "Something that frightened the old races into silence. Something that made them draw lines on their maps and beg their children never to cross them." "Do you believe the warnings, Admiral?" Hex asked. Turned to look at him. Her eyes were hard and certain. "I believe that our ancestors were too weak to face whatever lies beyond the boundary," she said. "I believe that the old races lacked the strength and courage to explore the unknown. But we are the masters of 900 worlds. We do not run from shadows and ancient stories." She straightened her uniform and walked to the center of the bridge. Around her, officers worked at their stations. Screens glowed with tactical data. The hum of the ship's engines vibrated through the floor. "Signal the fleet," commanded. "We depart immediately. We will chart the unknown regions. We will discover what lies beyond the boundary, and we will return with new territories for the Empire." The communication officer sent the signal. Across the fleet, 2,000 ships received the order. Engines powered up. Navigation systems calculated jump coordinates. Soldiers said quiet prayers to whatever gods they still believed in. And then, in a flash of light that split the darkness, the Third Expeditionary Fleet jumped toward the boundary. In the throne room of the capital world, Emperor watched the fleet's departure on a massive screen. He felt satisfaction in his ancient heart. Soon he would know what secrets lay beyond the edge of his maps. Soon he would add new territories to his eternal empire. He did not know that he would never see Admiral again. He did not know that the Third Fleet was sailing toward something far older and far stranger than anything that had ever encountered. He did not know that the warnings on the ancient maps were not superstition or fear. They were truth. They were the last desperate messages of civilizations that had made the same mistake they were about to make. The boundary was not a natural phenomenon. It was not an empty region of space. It was a wall, a barrier, a cage. And something lived on the other side. Something that had been waiting for a very, very long time. As the Third Fleet vanished into the darkness, the oldest of the Ani elders felt a tremor pass through his crystal body. He stood in his meditation chamber on a conquered world, surrounded by the relics of his destroyed civilization. He had lived for 6 million years. He had seen the rise and fall of 1,000 empires. And he knew, with terrible certainty, that they had just made the last mistake of their existence. He closed his crystal eyes and whispered a prayer in a language that had been dead for 1,000,000 years. It was a prayer for the souls of the Third Fleet, a prayer for the 3 million beings who were sailing toward something they could not possibly understand. They would learn the truth soon enough. They all did, in the end. The Third Fleet crossed the boundary on the 4,447th day of Emperor's 17th reign. Admiral stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched the stars change around her. At first, nothing seemed wrong. The ships completed their jump successfully. All 2,000 vessels appeared at their planned coordinates. Communication systems reported no problems. Sensors showed normal readings. The stars here were different. They burned hotter and brighter than the stars of the Empire. Blue giants and white dwarfs filled the darkness with fierce light. Science officers immediately began scanning the nearby systems. They found planets. They found asteroid fields. They found all the normal things one would expect to find in unexplored space. Allowed herself a small smile. The ancient warnings had been nothing but superstition. The old races had been afraid of their own shadows. There was nothing here to fear. Then the communications began to fail. It started slowly. Ships at the rear of the formation stopped responding to signals. At first, the communication officers thought it was a technical problem. They ran tests. They checked their equipment. Everything seemed to be working correctly. But the ships remained silent. Captain Hex approached the Admiral with a worried expression on his face. "Admiral, we have lost contact with 47 ships in the last rotation. No distress signals, no emergency beacons. They simply stopped responding." Frowned. 47 ships. That was more than 2% of her fleet. "Send scout ships to investigate. I want to know what happened to them." The scout ships departed. They flew toward the last known positions of the silent vessels. They searched for hours, scanning every direction, looking for any sign of the missing ships. They found nothing. No wreckage, no debris, no bodies, no energy signatures from weapons fire. The 47 ships had simply vanished. They had been there one moment and gone the next, as if they had never existed at all. Fear began to spread through the fleet. Soldiers whispered to each other in the corridors of their ships. Officers gathered in small groups and spoke in quiet voices. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. Admiral ordered the fleet to stop. She gathered her senior officers for an emergency meeting. They stood around a holographic map of the region, their faces pale and worried. "We are being hunted," said Commander, the fleet's chief tactical officer. "Something is picking off our ships one by one. We need to fight back." "Fight what?" Captain Hex asked. "We have detected no enemy ships, no weapons fire, no attacks of any kind. Our ships are simply disappearing." "Then we run," said another officer. "We return to the Empire and report what we have found." Nodded. It was the sensible choice. She had enough data to present to the Emperor. The boundary was clearly dangerous. A full military campaign with proper preparation would be needed to explore it safely. "Calculate jump coordinates back to the Empire," she ordered. "We are leaving." Her navigators bent over their consoles. They worked for several minutes, their fingers moving quickly across their screens. Then they stopped. They looked at each other with confusion in their eyes. The lead navigator turned to face the Admiral. His voice was shaking. "Admiral, I cannot find the boundary. It is no longer where we crossed it." "What do you mean?" demanded. "The stars have moved, Admiral, or we have moved. I cannot tell which. Every calculation I make leads deeper into unknown space. I cannot find a route back to the Empire." Felt cold fear grip her heart. She walked to the navigation console and looked at the readings herself. The navigator was right. The familiar stars of the Empire were nowhere to be found. Every direction showed only unknown territory. They were trapped. The fleet drifted through the strange space for 3 more days. Every day, more ships vanished. The soldiers and crew grew more and more afraid. Some of them stopped eating. Others refused to sleep. A few went mad and had to be locked in their quarters. On the 5th day beyond the boundary, the sensors detected something new. It was a signal, a simple pattern of electromagnetic radiation, the kind that primitive species used before they learned about faster-than-light communication. But it repeated in perfect mathematical intervals. It was clearly artificial. Someone had placed it there on purpose. A beacon. Gathered her officers again. The signal was coming from a nearby star system, a single yellow star with several planets orbiting it. Long-range scans showed that one of the planets had liquid water and a breathable atmosphere. "It could be a trap," Captain Hex warned. "Whatever is hunting us might be trying to lead us somewhere." "We have nowhere else to go," replied. "Our ships are vanishing. Our navigation systems cannot find a way home. This signal is the only lead we have." She made her decision. The fleet would follow the beacon. They traveled for 2 more days. The signal grew stronger as they approached. More ships vanished during the journey. By the time they reached the star system, had lost nearly 300 vessels. The fear in the fleet had grown into something close to panic. Then they saw it. The planet was beautiful. A blue-green sphere covered with oceans and continents. White clouds drifted across its surface. It looked peaceful. It looked welcoming. But that was not what made the freeze in terror. Orbiting the planet, arranged in silent concentric rings, were the remains of 1,000 fleets. Ships of every size and shape floated in the darkness. Recognized some of them immediately. There were vessels, old ones, ancient ones, ships from dynasties that had ruled before was even born. There were colony ships, Ani war crystals, ships from species that had no names in any language new. Some of the vessels were so old that they had become covered with space dust and cosmic debris. All of them were dark, all of them were dead, and all of them were facing outward, away from the planet, as if they had been trying to flee when something stopped them. "By the ancestors," Captain Hex whispered, "how many ships are there?" Sensors gave her the answer. Thousands, perhaps tens of thousands. The accumulated fleets of countless civilizations, all gathered in silent death around this peaceful-looking planet. The ancient races had not been afraid of nothing. They had been afraid of this. They had come here just like though, and they had never left. Admiral stood on her bridge and looked at the graveyard of ships. For the first time in her military career, she felt completely and utterly lost. Whatever had brought these fleets here was still present. Whatever had killed them was still waiting. And now the third fleet had joined them. She looked at the blue-green planet below. Somewhere down there was the source of the beacon. Somewhere down there were answers to questions she was not sure she wanted to ask. But she had no choice. She had to know. "Prepare a landing team," she ordered. Her voice was quiet but steady. "We are going down there." Captain Hex looked at her with fear in his eyes. "Admiral, is that wise?" "No," admitted. "But we need to understand what we are facing. We need to know what happened to all these ships, and we need to find a way to escape, or we will join them in this graveyard." She looked back at the planet. Its oceans glittered in the light of the yellow sun. Its continents were covered with what looked like forests and mountains and cities. Cities. Something lived down there. Something that had been collecting ships for thousands of years. Something that had drawn them all here with its beacon and then trapped them forever. Did not know what she would find on that planet. She did not know what kind of creature could destroy so many fleets without leaving any evidence of battle. But she was about to find out. The landing craft descended through the clouds of the blue-green planet. Inside sat 12 of the finest soldiers in the Empire. Sergeant Eth led the team. He was a veteran of 60 military campaigns. He had fought in wars across 100 worlds. He had killed enemies of every shape and size. He had never been afraid, not once in his long career. But as the craft broke through the clouds and the surface of the planet came into view, Eth felt something cold settle in his stomach. It was a feeling he did not recognize at first. Then he understood. Fear, he was afraid. The planet's surface was covered with cities. Massive structures of metal and stone and glass stretched across the landscape. Roads and bridges connected them. Vehicles moved through the streets. From orbit, the planet had looked peaceful and quiet. Up close, it was clearly a world of advanced civilization. But something was wrong. The architecture was strange. The buildings were too short. The doorways were too narrow. The windows were positioned at odd heights. Everything looked slightly wrong, as if it had been built for creatures very different from the landing craft touched down in the center of one of the cities. Eth led his team out into the open air. The gravity was heavy, much heavier than they were used to. Every step felt like walking through thick mud. The air smelled strange, clean and fresh, but with underlying scents that they did not recognize. Flowers, perhaps, or something like flowers. "Spread out," Eth ordered. "Search the buildings, find out who lives here." His soldiers moved through the empty streets. They entered buildings and searched rooms. They found furniture and tools and machines. They found clothing and food and personal items. Everything was sized for small creatures. The chairs were low to the ground. The tables barely reached the soldiers' knees. Private Ara called out from a large building near the center of the city. "Sergeant, you need to see this." Eth hurried to join her. The building was some kind of museum. Its walls were covered with images and artifacts. Displays showed the history of the planet and its people. And for the first time, Eth saw what lived here. They were small, much smaller than they had soft skin with no scales or armor, 2 eyes, 2 arms, 2 legs, no claws, no fangs, no natural weapons of any kind. They looked weak, they looked fragile, they looked like prey. But the images on the walls told a different story. Eth walked slowly through the museum, studying each display. He saw these small creatures hunting animals 10 times their size. He saw them crossing their world's oceans on wooden boats. He saw them building cities and creating machines and exploring their planet. Then the displays grew darker. He saw these creatures at war with each other, wars that burned entire continents, weapons that cracked the sky and poisoned the land. Millions of these small beings died in the images. Cities were reduced to ash. Forests became wastelands. But the creatures kept fighting, they kept surviving, they kept adapting. One display showed them splitting the atom. Another showed them walking on their own moon. A third showed them building ships that could travel between stars. And then the final displays. These were different from the others. They showed the creatures fighting something else, something from outside their world. In the images, massive alien ships descended upon the planet. Armies of strange beings invaded the cities. It looked like the end. It looked like extinction. But the small creatures fought back. They used weapons that seemed impossible. They made sacrifices that seemed insane. They refused to surrender, refused to die, refused to accept defeat. And they won. The next image showed the alien invaders in chains. Their ships burned in the sky. Their armies lay dead in the streets. The small creatures stood among the wreckage, bloody and wounded but alive. They had won. Eth moved to the next display. It showed another invasion. Different aliens this time, the same result, victory. And another, and another, and another. Every time the same story. Someone came to conquer this world. Someone tried to destroy these small, soft creatures. And every time the creatures won. Private Ara was trembling. "Sergeant, what are these things?" Eth did not answer. He had found a final display at the back of the museum. It was larger than the others, more detailed. It showed these creatures meeting the universe itself. They traveled to other worlds. They found ancient machines left by civilizations that had died long ago. They discovered things that lived between the stars, things that had no names, things that should not exist. And they fought them all. The images showed battles that seemed impossible. The small creatures facing entities of pure energy, fighting machines that could destroy planets, waging war against beings that existed outside of normal space and time. They lost many of these battles. Billions of them died. Entire generations were sacrificed, but they never stopped fighting. They never surrendered. They never accepted that they could not win. And slowly, impossibly, they began to win. The final image showed these creatures standing at the edge of the galaxy. Behind them was fire and death and destruction. Before them was endless darkness filled with things that wanted them dead. And they were smiling. Eth understood now. He understood why the ancient races had been afraid. He understood why they wept at the mention of the boundary. He understood why the Ani refused to speak of this place. These creatures were not prey. They were not weak. They were the most dangerous things in the universe. And they had just walked into their home. "Sergeant," Private Ara's voice was shaking badly now. "What do we do?" Before Eth could answer, his communicator crackled to life. Admiral's voice came through, thin and worried. "Sergeant Eth, report, what have you found?" Eth looked at the images surrounding him. The history of a species that had refused to die. the story of creatures that had fought the universe itself and won. He opened his mouth to describe what he had seen, but before he could speak, the lights in the museum went out. They were not alone anymore. Eth heard movement in the darkness, soft footsteps, quiet breathing, the sounds of small bodies moving through the shadows. He raised his weapon. His soldiers formed a defensive circle. Their training kept them calm. Their discipline kept them steady. But Eth knew it would not matter. He had seen what these creatures could do. He had seen the invasions they had survived. He had seen the enemies they had defeated. They had conquered 900 worlds. They had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. They thought they were the masters of the universe. They were wrong. Eth spoke one final word into his communicator. His voice was calm and clear, the voice of a soldier who had accepted his fate. Run! Then the line went dead. On the bridge of the eternal silence, Admiral heard the transmission cut off. She called Eth's name again and again. There was no response. Her tactical officer looked at her with fear in his eyes. Admiral, what do we do? Stared at the planet below. Somewhere down there, her soldiers had found something. Something that had frightened a 60-campaign veteran so badly that his only advice was to run. But there was nowhere to run. The boundary was sealed behind them. The stars had moved. They were trapped in this strange place with its graveyard of ships and its beautiful, deadly planet. Straightened her shoulders. She was an admiral. She would not hide from the unknown. We wait, she said. Whatever is down there knows we are here. It will come to us eventually. She was right. It did not take long. Admiral stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched the small vessel rise from the planet below. It was a crude thing, metal and fire and primitive technology. It should not have been able to reach orbit. It should not have been able to approach the mighty fleet. But it did. The vessel moved slowly through the graveyard of dead ships. It passed the ancient warships. It drifted past colony vessels and Ani war crystals. It seemed almost casual, as if its pilot made this journey every day. Captain Hex stood beside the admiral. His hand rested on his weapon. His scales had turned pale with fear. Should we destroy it? He asked. Shook her head. No, if they wanted us dead, we would be dead already. They are coming to talk. The small vessel approached the flagship and stopped a short distance away. Then a signal came through the communication system. It was a simple greeting in the mathematical language that all spacefaring species understood. Attention fleet, this is a representative of Earth. We wish to speak with your commander. Please respond. The communication officer looked at her with wide eyes. Admiral, what should I do? Open a channel, ordered. Let them see me. The screen at the front of the bridge flickered to life. An admiral saw a human for the first time. It was small, just as the museum images had shown. It wore a white suit of some kind and a helmet made of glass. Its face was visible through the helmet. Soft skin, two small eyes, a mouth that curved in a way that's translator identified as amusement. The creature was smiling at her. Greetings, Admiral, the human said. Its voice was calm and friendly. My name is Commander Sarah. Welcome to the Sol system. We have been expecting you. Kept her face still and emotionless. She would not show weakness to this strange creature. You have been expecting us? She asked. Of course. Your fleet crossed the boundary 5 days ago. We have been watching you since then. The human's smile grew a little wider. We watch everyone who crosses the boundary. You have been watching us vanish. His voice was cold. You have been taking our ships. Yes, the human did not deny it. We apologize for the distress this has caused, but we cannot allow anyone who crosses the boundary to simply leave. You have seen too much. Felt anger rising in her chest. What have we seen? Empty space, dead ships, a primitive planet with crude technology. The human laughed. It was a strange sound, not cruel, not mocking. It sounded almost kind. Admiral, you have seen the truth. You have seen what happens to those who come looking for us. You have seen the graveyard of 1,000 civilizations, and now you have seen us. You are nothing, said. Small, weak creatures with no natural weapons, that have conquered species far more dangerous than you. The human smile did not fade, but something changed in its eyes, something old and tired and sad. You are young, Admiral. Your empire is young. You have not yet learned what we learned long ago. The human paused. May I tell you a story? Did not respond, but she did not end the transmission either. The human continued. Many thousands of years ago, we were like you. We thought we were the masters of our world. We built cities and machines and weapons. We fought wars with each other. We nearly destroyed ourselves many times. Then we reached the stars, and we found that the universe was not empty. It was full of things, ancient things, hungry things, things that had been alive since before our sun was born. The human's voice grew quieter. They came for us, Admiral, one after another, species that wanted our world, machines that wanted to harvest us for fuel, entities that existed outside of normal space and saw us as insects to be crushed. We should have died. Every calculation said we would die. We were small and weak and primitive. We had no chance against the powers of the universe. But we did not die. The human leaned forward. Its eyes were bright and intense. We fought back. We adapted. We learned. We took the weapons of our enemies and turned them against their masters. We made alliances with species that hated us. We sacrificed billions of our own people to buy time for the rest. We did things that no sane species would do. We strapped nuclear weapons to our own bodies and walked into the heart of enemy fleets. We poisoned our own worlds to deny them to invaders. We created weapons that could destroy stars and then used them without hesitation. We won, Admiral. Against all odds, against all logic, against all reason, we won. Listened in silence. The human's words matched what Sergeant Eth had seen in the museum, a species that refused to accept defeat, a species that would do anything to survive. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because you need to understand. The human's voice was gentle now. The boundary exists because of us. We built it. We maintain it. We created it to protect ourselves from the universe, but also to protect the universe from us. Frowned, what do you mean? The human sighed. It was a sad sound. We are dangerous, Admiral, more dangerous than you can imagine. When we fight, we do not stop. We do not surrender. We do not accept limitations. We will burn entire galaxies if we have to. We will crack open suns and harvest their fire. We will tear apart the fabric of space itself. The other species learned this the hard way. The ones who invaded us, the ones who tried to destroy us, they are all gone now, every single one of them. We did not just defeat them, we erased them from existence. The human's eyes met through the screen. We scared ourselves, Admiral. We looked at what we had become and we were horrified. So we built the boundary. We sealed ourselves away from the rest of the galaxy. We stopped expanding. We stopped conquering. We chose to stay in our little corner of space and never leave. And we warned everyone else to stay away. Understood now. The ancient warnings on the star maps, the terror of the older races, the graveyard of ships orbiting this planet. The boundary was not a wall to keep others out. It was a cage to keep humans in. What will you do with us? She asked. Her voice was quiet. The human smile returned, but it was sad now. The same thing we do with everyone who crosses the boundary. We will teach you. We will show you what is out there in the universe. The real threats. The ancient powers that still sleep between the galaxies. The things that even we are afraid of. And when you understand, when you truly understand what we have protected you from all these years, you will thank us. You will beg us to let you stay. You will never want to leave. Admiral looked at the human on the screen, small, soft, smiling. and she believed every word it said. "What happened to my soldiers?" she asked. "The ones who landed on your planet?" "They are safe," the human replied. "They are learning just as you will learn. This is not a prison, Admiral. It is a sanctuary, the only safe place in a very dangerous universe." The human gestured to the graveyard of ships surrounding the planet. All of them came here thinking they were conquerors. All of them left as refugees. They chose to stay because they understood the truth. The universe is vast and dark and filled with horrors beyond imagination. And we humans have been fighting those horrors for a very long time. You are safe now, Admiral. For the first time in your species' history, you are truly safe. Did not know whether to feel relieved or terrified. Perhaps both. The Empire waited for the Third Fleet to return. They waited 1 year. Emperor sat on his crystalline throne and watched the stars, expecting to see Admiral's ships appear with news of conquest and discovery. Nothing came. They waited 10 years, sent the Fourth Fleet to investigate. 2,000 more ships crossed the boundary and vanished into silence. They waited 50 years. The Seventh Fleet followed the Fourth, then the Ninth, then the 12th. Each time the ships crossed the boundary and never returned. No signals, no survivors, no explanation. Grew desperate. He had lived for 3,000 years. He had conquered 900 worlds. He had never faced a mystery he could not solve, an enemy he could not defeat. But the boundary defeated him. In the 103rd year after the Third Fleet's departure, made his final decision. He would lead the Grand Armada himself, every remaining warship in the Empire, the largest fleet ever assembled in history. His advisors begged him not to go. The subject species warned him that he was making a terrible mistake. Even the Ani, silent for so long, spoke at last. "Do not cross the boundary," the ancient crystal being said. "What waits on the other side is not an enemy you can fight. It is not a territory you can conquer. It is something else entirely." Did not listen. The Grand Armada crossed the boundary. 50,000 warships, 10 million soldiers, the Emperor himself in a body crafted specifically for war. They never returned. Without its Emperor and its fleets, the Empire began to fall. The subject species rose up against their masters. Civil wars erupted across the 900 worlds. Colonies declared independence. The great institutions that had held the Empire together for 12,000 years crumbled into dust. The crystalline throne shattered. The capital world burned. They who had once ruled the stars became refugees and wanderers. And in the ruins of their civilization, the survivors found the ancient star maps. They saw the warnings their ancestors had ignored. They read the words that had been written so long ago. Do not cross, do not seek, do not call out into that dark. They understood now, but it was too late. Beyond the boundary, Admiral learned the truth. The humans took her to their world. They showed her their cities and their machines and their history. They introduced her to the other species that had crossed the boundary before her. Ani, beings from civilizations so old that their names had been forgotten. All of them had come as conquerors. All of them had stayed as guests. The humans taught about the universe, the real universe, not the small, safe portion that they had explored, the vast, dark, terrifying expanse that stretched beyond the boundaries of known space. They showed her the things that drifted between galaxies, entities so large that they used stars for warmth, machines built by civilizations that had died billions of years ago, still following their programming to harvest life wherever they found it. Intelligences that existed in dimensions humans could barely perceive, reaching into normal space to consume anything they touched. The universe was not empty, it was full of nightmares. And the humans had fought them all. Saw the records of ancient wars, battles that had lasted for centuries, weapons that had cracked planets and shattered suns, sacrifices that had cost billions of lives. The humans had lost many of these wars. Entire generations had been wiped out. Their civilization had nearly collapsed a dozen times. But they had never stopped fighting. Not because they were brave, not because they were strong, but because they simply refused to die. Other species surrendered when they faced impossible odds. They accepted defeat. They let themselves be consumed or enslaved or destroyed. Humans did not do this. When the universe told humans to die, they built weapons from their own bones and fought until the universe itself grew tired of killing them. It was not courage. It was not nobility. It was spite. Pure, stubborn, irrational spite. A refusal to accept that anything had the right to end them. A determination to keep fighting long after any reasonable species would have given up. And it had worked. The ancient horrors had learned to fear humanity. The things between galaxies avoided the region of space where humans lived. The machines and entities and nightmares that consumed other civilizations stayed away from Earth and its children. The humans had made themselves too dangerous to attack, too stubborn to destroy, too angry to kill. But this victory had come at a terrible cost. "We became monsters," Commander Sarah told one day. They sat together on a balcony overlooking one of Earth's great cities. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. "We did things that still haunt us," continued. "We destroyed species that might have become our friends. We created weapons that should never have existed. We sacrificed our own people without hesitation or regret. We looked at ourselves and saw that we had become the very thing we were fighting against." Turned to look at, her eyes were old, so much older than her face suggested. "That is why we built the boundary. That is why we sealed ourselves away. We chose exile because we knew that if we kept expanding, kept fighting, kept conquering, we would eventually destroy everything. The universe is safer with us locked away." Sat in silence for a long time, she thought about the empire, the 900 worlds, the 12,000 years of conquest and glory. It all seemed so small now, so meaningless. They had thought they were powerful. They had thought they were the masters of the stars, but they had only been playing in a small, safe corner of the universe, a corner that the humans had protected without anyone knowing. "What will happen to my people?" asked, "the ones who stayed behind?" His face grew sad. "I am sorry, Admiral, your empire will fall. It is already falling. Without its fleets, without its emperor, it cannot survive. But some will live. They always do. And perhaps in time they will learn the lesson your emperor refused to learn. Some boundaries exist for a reason." Years passed, grew old on the human world. She watched the other refugees from a dozen species live out their lives in the sanctuary beyond the boundary. She learned about human culture and human history and human dreams. And she came to understand something important. The humans were not monsters. They were guardians. They had seen the horrors of the universe, and they had fought to protect all life from those horrors. They had built the boundary not just to contain themselves, but to give other species a warning, a chance to stay safe. Most species ignored the warning. Most species were too arrogant, too proud, too foolish to listen. But the warning was there. The humans had done everything they could. In her final years, composed a message. She wrote it in every language she knew. She recorded it in every format that might survive the ages. It was a simple warning, the same warning that had appeared on the ancient star maps, the same words that the humans had been whispering across the galaxy for thousands of years. "Do not cross, do not seek, do not call out into that dark. They will answer. And if they answer, you will never leave." Died on Earth at the age of 307. She was buried with full honors, alongside the other admirals and generals and leaders who had come as conquerors and stayed as refugees. Her warning was sent out into the galaxy. It was placed on star maps and carved into monuments and broadcast on every frequency that might reach other civilizations. Some species listened, most did not. But the warning remained, and beyond the boundary, the humans continued their endless watch. They guarded the gate between the safe regions of space and the horrors that lurked beyond. They did not ask for thanks. They did not expect gratitude. They simply did what they had always done. They fought. They survived. They refused to let the darkness win. And somewhere in the ruins of the empire, a young scholar found an ancient star map with strange markings in the corner. She read the warnings written there. She studied the tailies of fleets that had crossed the boundary and vanished. She thought about seeking the truth, about building a ship and crossing into the unknown. Then she looked at the words written on the map, words that had been placed there by beings who had seen things she could not imagine. Do not cross, do not seek, do not call out into that dark. The young scholar rolled up the map and placed it back in its case. She returned it to the archive where she had found it. And she never spoke of the boundary again. Some borders exist for a reason. Some truths are better left unknown. And some darkness is best left undisturbed. The end.